Alrighty, thank you for tuning in, everyone. I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews, and joining me today is Fell, a Toronto-based creator of comics. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. Well, I always like to start because I very much am pro-Canadian, pro-local as much as possible. From
Yes.
what I understand, you are based in the GTA, correct?
Yes.
All right, and like, were you born and raised in the GTA like myself? Did you come from Niagara or from another spot?
I was actually born in Hong Kong, and then I came here to Markham in like 1997-ish, and then I've
Oh,
been here since. Yeah,
awesome.
a little farther than Niagara.
A little bit.
Yes.
Um, I was actually lucky enough. Oh God, 3 years ago now. I lived in Hong Kong for 2 years.
Oh, no
Just
way.
yeah,
So cool.
my where I lived, my apartment was in Wan Chai, and yeah, from there it's very central. So it's very
Nice.
cool. Yeah. So I'm glad you made the 16-hour flight.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I don't remember much. I was probably sleeping or crying as 3-year-olds do, but I'm also glad to make it here.
Perfect. Well, yeah, so we're here to talk about comics and your comics specifically. So let's jump right into
Hmm.
it. So, Fell Hound, as you'll be found on social media.
Yeah.
How did you get your start in comics?
Uh, I've I've always kind of enjoyed comics here and there. Like I read a lot of Kevin and Hobbes when I was young and like old Simpsons comics. But I never really got into them until around maybe the end of high school, beginning of college. And that was around when the Avengers movies started coming out. And I was one of those people who was like, oh, this was really cool. And that's kind of how I jumped into it. I think one of the first comics that I picked up was actually Batwoman Elegy, and
Oh,
I
right on.
became an instant fan, as you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, I don't know, I just opened it and I loved J.H. Williams' art on it. Like it's so abstract and like it, like the way he draws comics, it kind of like broke down kind of the existing rules and panel rulings of traditional comics that I've seen. He uses a lot of I don't know, it's just very abstract and very colorful, very beautiful, and it kind of blew my mind away on how, I don't know, creative the medium could be.
Mm,
And then from then on, I kind of snowballed and picked up more superhero comics, and I made my way to indies, and I was just like, wow, this is a really cool medium to work in.
perfect. Well, I'm glad to hear. Yeah, and that's a great jump on point. Um, so yeah, I mean, when it comes to your comics, as we mentioned, when did you start sort of creating comics, and how did that journey begin for you?
So I've always enjoyed, I guess, creative writing. Like I've been doing that since I was 12 years old. I like writing short stories. I like writing poetry. A lot of it was like angsty teenage poetry, but it was a start and I enjoyed doing it. And I think at one point, after I started reading more comics, I realized that I feel like there was a lot of potential in using a medium that combined pictures and words. And I've always found difficulty in articulating and describing some things when I was writing prose. And I just
Mm.
thought it might be somehow I thought it'd be easier if I could draw it instead of writing it. And then I started drawing comics or just trying to teach myself how to draw. And now I realize that drawing is also very, very hard. And they're both very hard. But I don't know, it works. I enjoy doing it. So that's kind of how
Perfect.
the comics came to be.
Perfect. All right. And actually, that's a great sort of segue point. So, if I'm not mistaken, the two comics you have right now that people can find on your Gumroad are "Do You Believe in an Afterlife"
Yes.
and "Commander Rao." And from
Yes.
what I understand, this book came first, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I did get them in reverse order. That's fine.
It's
Um,
all good.
it, as I mentioned, it's a good segue because "Do You Believe in an Afterlife" is very much so a comic, but then you do have chunks and portions that are more short story esque, where there's far more writing
Yeah.
and drawing. Um, I'm curious because obviously in Commander Rao, which is a more traditional comic where every page is, you know, imagery and all that
Yeah.
stuff and paneling. Um, how did that sort of evolution happen? Like, what went into making "Do You Believe in an Afterlife" the way that you did?
So before I made Do You Believe in an Afterlife, I actually made a different comic. It was called Captain Fix It. And that was kind of the first comic I ever, like the first full length comic I ever tried to make. But my art wasn't that good at the time. So I kind of took it down. I never really showed that many people. And at one point, I kind of realized it was very much a practice comic, and I wanted to just take some time off to reset and focus on more basic skills. Like I wanted to actually get better at drawing before I tackle my next comic. So with Do You Believe in an Afterlife, that actually started out as a series of illustrations. I started with 6 illustrations, and it was just kind of to practice coloring and drawing and backgrounds and have like a sense of narrative in the drawings. And then I posted them online, and people just seemed to like it. Like I had a lot of people ask me, "Wow, what's this story about?" Or like, "Is this going to be a comic?" And at one point, I was like, "Well, it wasn't my plan to make it a comic, but if people wanted to know their story, I guess I could try to finagle the illustrations into something of a story." So yeah, a lot of it was kind of working backwards to make Do You Believe in an Afterlife and trying to fill in the plot. Um, and a lot of it really was on my end, just trying to practice and get back in the ropes of storytelling. So there is a lot of prose in it. And part of the prose was because I wasn't super comfortable in making, I guess, a full length comic at the time based on my skill. And I also kind of wanted to get back into prose writing because I haven't done prose writing in like, I don't know, like 7 years. All I've written were college essays. So it was like good practice. Yeah.
Fair enough. Now, do forgive me for those who don't know out there. What would you define as a pro?
Uh, that's a good question actually. I guess something that you get out there. I'm guessing probably like yourself some money. I guess like at that point.
Oh, okay. So it's some sort
Yeah,
of written work that you're getting paid for.
I guess kind of. Yeah,
Okay.
I guess that's my own personal definition, or that's where I considered my debut to be. So like, Do You Believe in an Afterlife was the first kind of comic that I sold for money, and that's kind of what I considered my first pro-ish work.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned sort of you've done a lot of creative writing and things like that. Specifically in this area, the GTA, obviously with OCAD being here, a lot of the artists, comic book writers, and artists that I've talked to, in some way have been involved in OCAD. I always like to ask, do you have some sort of formal training, either from OCAD or another university or anything like that?
I actually don't. I'm self-taught. Yeah.
Oh, right
Uh,
on.
yeah. My sister, she's actually also an illustrator, and she went to OCAD for like illustration and graphic design and all that. So I kind of saw her journey going through art school, and she had a lot of opinions about it.
Okay.
And at one point, I was considering going to art school to get some more formal training, but she kind of said some very wise words, and I've decided to just stick with being self-taught because there's so many tutorials online nowadays and like books and resources. It just felt like the better situation for me.
Perfect. And
Mm-hmm.
as I mean, I'm holding the whole comic right here. Clearly, it's works. Um,
Oh, thank you.
yeah. Um, what was the time difference there? I guess between the release of the two. Like, I imagine it wasn't like, oh, 1 month it was this, the next month it was that. Was there
No.
some? What was the incubation period for Rao?
I think Do You Believe in an Afterlife was released December 2019, and then I launched the Kickstarter for Commander Rao like the end of July 2020. So I spent about 4, 6-ish months just drawing the comic and trying to get the story and all the character designs down. But obviously, the story was in my head for a while before I actually got all of it down. So it kind of smoothed things over a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when it comes to actually getting Rao on paper, like you mentioned, you sort of had the story in your head. Um, it is a very, and I find this very effective in the comics construction, but it is a very word light novel, I guess I'll say. Like it's not a lot of
Yeah.
writing in it, which the way that you've delivered it, it actually reminded me a little bit of the Batman. Um, RIP event that they did for Robin in the New 52. Uh,
Ooh,
Specifically, there's an
yeah.
issue where it's shows what Batman is doing after Robin has died, but there's no words. It's just him doing stuff. I
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, Rao felt similar to that to me, and I think where you had in the I was gonna say lyrics, um, speech and dialogue and things, you really manipulated that well to sort of show off your characters.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah.
yeah, when it comes to like making Rao, again, Commander Rao, of course. What was sort of the timeline when it comes to the Kickstarter? Because like I've had a few people on about with regard to working in Kickstarter, and how did that go for you?
So this is my first Kickstarter. I obviously tried to recruit a lot of help before I launched it. I have had a lot of friends who've had launched Kickstarters before, so I feel like having them help me tackle a lot of my questions and concerns beforehand really helped my nerves in trying to launch the Kickstarter.
Yep.
But yeah, so when I launched the Kickstarter, all the art was done, and I just had
Oh.
the lettering left to do.
Whoa.
So I felt like that also helped me alleviate some concerns in getting the book done because I knew most of it was already done. And Letter Squids, I think he finished lettering it by like the last week of the Kickstarter, so
No.
most things were good to go. Yeah, but it I did learn a lot. Kickstarter is a lot of work, especially just promotion and trying to keep the hype up because obviously day one that's very important. You're pretty much on the computer, on social media, screaming about your book all day long.
Yeah.
And you just have to find ways to keep that energy up and finding ways to keep people interested for the next 30 days. And yeah, that was a journey.
I bet.
Yeah.
I I find it interesting that you basically you nearly had the book in its entirety completed before the Kickstarter started. Um, my one of my previous guests I had on had a similar arrangement, and they basically, like you just said, it's almost a job in and of itself.
Yeah.
Um, your as you mentioned, yours was 30 days, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. And when it comes to like you said, staying on it, keep the hype train up. Um, you do have social media out there. You've got Instagram, you've got Twitter. Um, it really is like a full time job, right? Like you're posting.
Oh,
I'm assuming.
100%. Oh my
Perfect. So
gosh.
daily posts and things like that. Um, Obviously, it was a success. It's worked. Primarily, did you use the Kickstarter to do like a printing run, or where did sort of how did you end up using that?
Yeah, so I use Kickstarter mostly to fund the printing and shipping of the comic, and eventually all the expenses paid off any commissions and lettering. Uh, there was a little bit of trouble getting the comic printed because there was some mix-ups at the printer,
Oh,
and I had to get a lot of books reprinted, and then I ended up switching printers. But yeah, that kind of slowed things down a little bit. But eventually, I had a friend who helped me out with the printing. Ricky Lima, he's also a Canadian comic book writer. Really nice guy, really good at helping me with print stuff. He's pretty much my print guru. So I always say there wouldn't be a book in print if it weren't for him.
perfect. Well, we'll
But
make
yeah,
sure. Yeah, we'll make sure we give him a nice shout out. I did want to confirm because the two stories feel very connected to me. Are they in fact connected?
they're actually separate universes and separate stories, but they are similar in that I feel like I like to play with sci-fi, dystopian, apocalyptic, and robots. So they have some
Yes.
shared elements. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So anyone out there can pick up either of the two books, totally disconnected, read them, enjoy them, don't have to worry about getting one before the other. That's what I
Yes.
like to hear. Yeah. Perfect. And
Standalone.
yeah, as I've held them up before, I have print copies. I just like print. But they are available for digital on Gumroad, correct?
Yes. So they're both available on digital. I think I have 3 copies left of Do You Believe in an Afterlife? And Commander Rao is actually sold out.
Oh,
There will be a reprint sometime later this year, but I don't know when right now.
perfect. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that you've sold down, well, nearly out of Do You Believe in an Afterlife and completely out of RAL. That's awesome.
Oh,
Congrats.
thank you. Yeah.
Um, when it comes to Commander Rao, what made you want to tell the story the way that you did?
So Commander was actually it started off as a practice comic to practice drawing fight scenes. After Do You Believe in an Afterlife, I didn't really have that big of I guess, a sequential portfolio. And the art that I did have in Do You Believe in an Afterlife was very, like it, I felt like it didn't show a lot of my range. So I wanted to
Okay.
try to do something completely different and challenge myself and show a little more range in my sequential storytelling. And in my head, it started out as an 8-page fight sequence, which was pretty much the first 8 pages of Commander Rao. And then it kind of snowballed and just became its own thing, really. But yeah,
Perfect. That's
like
awesome.
I ended up taking a lot of inspiration from animated shows because I was watching Castlevania at the time, and I was like, wow,
Oh,
these fight scenes are so good.
yes.
Oh, I love that show. Yeah, I just wanted to see if I could make something that kind of flowed on the page and challenge myself in that regard.